All right, Brian, we talked about what Notre Dame's offense needs to do, what they need to do as a team. We talked about the areas of concern that we have. And in order to maximize the potential of the things that we feel really good about, and in order to nullify some of the things that we don't feel great about, game wreckers got to step up. Game wreckers have to step up. And
we say it all the time, Trev, right? I mean, when you play the best teams, it's not just about grinding out a win and just doing enough. I mean, you're going to need playmakers to make plays. Sometimes it's your dudes being dudes, right? It's your best players being your best players. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's other guys step up. I mean, one of the biggest plays I remember as a kid in a Super Bowl, two of the best moments I've ever in my childhood of guys stepping up in Super Bowls were guys that didn't do a whole lot before and guys that didn't do a whole lot afterwards. I think of Timmy Smith in the Super Bowl against the Broncos for when he played for the Redskins. I think of was it Larry Smith? Who's the corner for Dallas that had the pick six against Neil O'Donnell in the Super Bowl for the Cowboys? Was it Larry Smith?
I'm not sure.
But I mean, he was a guy that he wasn't like he wasn't like a guy that that went out there, and I don't think it was Larry Smith. Y'all help me in the chat. Who was the DB for the Cowboys that had the pick sixes against the Steelers in the Super Bowl back in the 90s? Picked off Neil O'Donnell. But Sean Stars would know this one. He would know that one. But it's sometimes it's complementary players stepping up and having the games of their lives, right? I mean, that's Larry Brown. Is that who it was? Was it Larry Brown? Let's see here. Because you know how I am, Trevor. It's Larry Brown.
It's
Larry Brown. Yeah. I got the Larry part right. Larry Brown.
did.
Thanks, Jeff Fluke. Yeah. And Ryan Roberts and then Jeff Fluke both said Brown. So I knew it was Larry something and not Larry Allen, but sometimes it's the complimentary player stepping up and being a game wrecker. But the fact is somebody has to step up and be a game wrecker for you. And that's what the difference was in last year's game for Notre Dame Ohio State. Travion got that. Travion had one crease all day. It was helped a little bit by holding, but didn't get called. We had one crease all day where a Notre Dame linebacker had a bad run fit. One. And what did he do with that one crease? He went 60. Right? Notre Dame had a guy with a chance to wreck the game late in the game with a pick that would have ended the game. Notre Dame wins, and he didn't make it. Right? 3rd and 19. Kyle McCord throws the ball. Emeka does what he needs to do. Ramon Henderson doesn't do what he needs to do. Emeka makes the play. Ohio State wins the game 2 plays later. I mean, those are all things that you look at and say, those are what game wreckers are. And you're not going to win this game if you're Notre Dame if you don't have multiple game wreckers on both sides of the ball, in my opinion. And there's a lot of options. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of have some fun with this and kind of predict who we think the game wreckers are going to be. And this isn't meant to be that if these 3 guys don't step up and wreck the game, Notre Dame is toast. That's not what we're saying. It's more of we know game wreckers need to step up. Here's who our kind of our prediction. We're going to have some fun with it. But like if we're going to talk about Jeremiah Love in a second, but if he doesn't wreck the game, but Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams do, same thing happens. Same outcome is the same. You get the point that we're making here. But we're going to have some fun with it. And we're going to kind of put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, with some of these game wreckers. We got 3 on offense and 3 on defense. So we're going to have some fun with that, Trev. So why don't you kick things off? It was funny when Trevor was giving me his notes on things, I started kind of stopped writing because I was like, we're pretty much at the same thing. And I started listing my game, or he started listing his game wrecker. Did I start listing mine? Did I go first on this one? I started listening to mine, and he just kind of smirks at me, and he just puts his pen down, and he's like, okay, here's mine. And it was like almost word for word on some of them because we were in the same position.
Yeah.
It was like, all right, cool, we're on the same page. So this one, we don't have to, okay, here's mine, here's yours. We're just going to go. And I think on offense, it's a very no-brainer on number 1. And it's Riley Leonard.
Yeah. I mean, look, for all the reasons that we had talked about in the earlier parts of the show, in the IU week of game prep, in the Georgia week of game prep, in the Penn State week of game prep, these are the moments why Riley Leonard came to South Bend. And he's done it differently in every game. That is what makes him dangerous, right?
Yeah. Well, like I was arguing with Andrew Gilmore, and Andrew knows I love him. We don't agree on a lot of things. He knows I love him, but I'm just got to bust his chops sometimes. But talking about, well, his longest run was 6 yards against Penn State. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a stat. That doesn't tell you about the impact. It doesn't tell you about how many 3-yard runs he had on 3rd and 1, which led to Notre Dame having their best third down performance in years against one of the best third down defenses in college football. They literally dropped Penn State like 30 spots in one game in third down ranking at the end of the year. They went from like top 20 something to like 50 something, because of that. The number one red zone defense in college football, Riley got in the end zone. Like, that's what we're talking about. It's going to be different every time. Against Georgia, it was Riley making big plays, 32-yard run, 13-yard scramble, getting outside, outrunning the Georgia defense outside for a 3rd and 7. And that's that. But against Penn State, it was moving the chains in key moments and then making some big time throws. I think in this game, he's going to need to do both of those things. I think in this game, Riley's arm and his legs are going to have to both be on point if they're going to win this football game. Is it possible they can win if he doesn't, dominate on the ground? Absolutely, it's possible. And I don't even think it's even about making plays in his legs, like he's got to throw for 250 and run for $120. So I'm talking about, it's like 3rd and 5. It's a key drive. You're down by 3. You're at midfield, and it's 3rd and 5, and they leave a gap open, and you take off running for a 12-yard gain, 8-yard gain, move the chains, and you eventually go down and score. That's game. That's wrecking the game. That's continuing a drive and setting up a score because you ran for 8 yards. It's on 3rd and 1, getting 1. All right, you don't need 2, you just need 1. Just if it's 3rd and 1.5, get 1.5, and then being able to avoid those sacks where it's a 2nd and 9, and JT beats the left tackle off the ball, and it looks like it's about to be a sack, and Riley makes a miss, spins out, and throws the ball away, and it's now 3rd and 9 instead of 3rd and 17, and you convert that 3rd and 9 the next play. It's things like that, Trev, that even if it's not running for 100 yards, and he could, I mean, that could be the thing too. If he runs for 100 yards, same thing. But it's more about, he's just got to be a playmaker with his legs, and what that looks like. And that's what makes him so dangerous, is Riley Leonard making plays with his legs looks different all the time. Against Georgia, it was racking up a bunch of yards. Against Penn State, it was those impact downhill creasing 3rd and 1, getting it. It was about the red zone. It was about on that final drive, Notre Dame was like, look, we're running Riley Leonard, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they moved the chains twice. Because when they got that interception at the end of the game, they were not in field goal range. Unless Sebastian Janikowski was coming out of retirement, or Spencer Schrader was still at Notre Dame, from 2 years ago. But it looks different all the time. He made those type of clutch plays against Penn State, and then threw some dimes. Right? Against Georgia, he didn't throw any dimes, but it was about him making those impact plays with his legs. And against Indiana, it was more about him avoiding sacks and getting the ball out. And then late in the game, putting that thing away with that gorgeous throw to Jordan Faison. In all 3 games, Riley Leonard was a playmaker. He was a game wrecker. But it looked completely different in each game. And that's what makes Riley Leonard such a big-time player, and what makes him dangerous. And if you're going to win this game, he's the one guy that I think we must be right about. Notre Dame has won a playoff game with Jeremiah Love going for less than 20 yards. Because they got a lot of other weapons. I don't think they can win this game if Riley Leonard's not a game wrecker in some way, shape, form, or fashion. That's the one that I'm like, in all seriousness, I think if Riley doesn't play well, I don't think Notre Dame can win.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is a fun segment, but I'm with you, and I think that's why he was both of our number ones. Look, if people haven't learned it by now, right, and I understand it to a degree, but I've been saying this legitimately all season long. If you're going to evaluate, and not you being anybody specific, but if you are going to evaluate the effectiveness of Riley Leonard by only looking at the box score, you're not doing his performances justice. The best thing that he did against Georgia, and arguably one of the best things that he did all season, was a 9-yard rush where he escapes the pocket, breaks a tackle in the backfield, outruns a corner, and jumps over
about the Georgia
Malachi
game?
Starks. Yeah. Yeah. Jumps
outruns
over.
their big-time linebacker,
Yeah.
outruns one of their corners, and then hurdles over their All-American safety that
Stiff arm
the
Smell Munden.
Football Writers Association of America thought was better than
Yeah.
Xavier Watts.
Stiff arm Smell Munden outruns Harris, their corner to the edge, and jumps over Malachi Starks. But if you're only going to look at the box score, you're going to say one of his best plays was 1 carry for 9 yards. That's Riley Leonard in a nutshell, man. You got to watch him play. But he's going to absolutely have to step up in this game and just continue to be who he has been for 3 straight postseason games. Like, the thing that I love so much about Riley Leonard is he is at the moment who the team needs him to be. For Georgia, they needed him. Hey, Riley, we need your legs. Rushes for 80 yards. Against Penn State, hey, Riley, we're going to need you to start throwing the ball, man.
And move the chains and attack them down the field.
We need you to start trusting your guys. And he did it. Yeah. Against IU, especially after they went up, they were like, hey, man, just go be an athletic game manager. That's what we need you to do against IU. Facilitate. We're going to ask you to make a play at some point. And he did that to Jordan Faison, and he capitalized it off with running in a touchdown, which broke or tied the single season record for quarterback rushing touchdowns. Broke. Thank you. So that's who he's been all postseason, and he's going to have to continue to do it, Brian.
To make a point, you talk about the biggest game of his life up to this moment was the Penn State game. Team's down 10-0. He gets knocked out for a series. Steve Angeli does a great job coming in, getting points, huge. And then second half, Riley goes off. I just want to point out something that when you talk about that Penn State offense or that Penn State defense and how good it is, I just want to point out that coming into that game, the most yards per attempt Penn State had allowed all year to any quarterback was 8.8 to Dylan Gabriel in the Big Ten title game. Riley Leonard threw 23 passes in that game and averaged 9.7 yards per attempt. Almost a full yard better than any other quarterback did against them this season. That he did it differently and that's a week after he threw for 90 yards against Georgia.
Yep.
A week after against that same Georgia team, he averaged 3.8 yards per attempt. Just need him to do something different. And it can be maddening at times because you don't know what you're going to get, but it also is fun to watch.
Oh man!
Because he's that kid that Trev, you and I, we've admitted before, and I have no problem admitting this. I've always been a big numbers nerd. I've always been a stats nerd. I've joked that my dad, when I was like 10, 11 years old, we had bedtimes. He'd come into my room. I'd have the covers over me and a flashlight, and he hears papers moving. Well, what do you think usually when you're 10, 11, 12-year-old boy, if that's happening? My dad lifts up the covers, and I'm doing plays, or I'm drawing stats, or I'm calculating the box score from the Reds game that I literally listened to on 700 WLW, and I'm taking a box score from home. Like, I've always been that kind of stats nerd. Riley Leonard is like my least favorite player ever when it comes to trying to use statistics to prove points.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it. Right? I mean, you just have to be like, yeah, look, I know he did that, and I know he did that, and I know he did that, but did you watch the game? Because the dude was pretty impactful. And that's the thing about him that makes him so fun to watch, but infuriating to evaluate. Because you can't quite appreciate what he's done. I mean, against Navy, he passed for 178 yards and rushed for 83. Those aren't lights out numbers, but he was so incredibly dominant in that game. You have a hard time really understanding how good he was because the numbers don't really blow you away. Like when CJ Stroud had a dominant game, he'd throw for like 430. And you're like, yep, see, he was dominant. Look at those numbers, completed 75%. And with Riley, it's like he was dominant. And somebody who doesn't know football or didn't watch the games, I'm like, dude, he only passed for X number of yards. He only rushed for X number of yards. And you're like, was he really that good? The Indiana game was a perfect example. He goes 23 of 32, 201 yards, 6.3 per attempt, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And he rushed for 30 yards and a score. I'm like, dude, but you don't understand how many yards he saved this offense, where it put any other quarterback in the playoff in that game, and it's a sack half of the time. And it's just like, that's the stuff you just can't evaluate when you're breaking down Riley Leonard. You can't put numbers on those. I mean, you could kind of to a degree, but you're not going to look at a box score and see that impact. You're going to be like 4-yard completion. He had 3 straight 4-yard completions. Like, yeah, but they should have lost at least 13 or 14 yards on those 3 plays. And that's the difference.
You know, with Riley Leonard's numbers, man, it feels like every single yard that he gets is meaningful. That's my argument with him. Is it might not? Yeah, he might have a game where he passes for $175 and rushes for 60. 235 total yards isn't going to blow anybody away. But every single one of those yards was meaningful. And I'm not saying that if CJ Stroud passed for 430, they weren't. But it's
different.
Yeah.
Because that's how he dominated.
Totally.
Was that way.
Totally.
And Riley Leonard dominates in a different way. That's the point. It's not to discredit, oh, well, you know, CJ Stroud, just all he did was throw for 430 yards. I mean, if Riley Leonard throws for 430 yards, the odds are this is like, you know, Nebraska, Florida outcome, you know, territory scoring game like we saw in 1995. But it's not going to, I'm just saying, like, but it's not meant to disparage CJ Stroud. It's just meant to kind of find that polar opposite type of player and how they impact the game.
Totally. The next one that we had down, Brian, was Jeremiah Love. And we've been kind of hitting around it all show. We've been talking about Notre Dame's playmakers and who needs to step up for them. And I'm not staking the claim that Jeremiah Love has to step up like he's let anybody down. That touchdown run he had against Penn State might have been the hardest 3 yards I've seen anybody get in football. I mean, legitimately, that was nuts.
Yeah.
But Jeremiah Love, for me, I think is due. He's been contained for the most part in the playoffs, rightfully so. Every single time he comes into the game, defenses have to ID, where's Waldo? Where's number 4? But Jeremiah Love for both of us is going to be that next game wrecker, Brian, because he is that guy that can take over football games. And he's shown it all season.
He doesn't need a lot of touches to do it.
No.
The thing that makes Jeremiah so impressive is, I mean, think about it. He had 2 runs against Penn State that will be shown for ages. He had the touchdown run and the play where he hurdled over a linebacker. They both went for 2 yards. I mean, think about that. Guy had 2 runs that I've seen replayed on Twitter and ESPN breakdowns and CBS, all these other breakdowns, and they keep showing those 2 runs. And I'm like, my man gained 4 yards total on those 2 runs. Right? But like if you go back and look at that play and you look at where he made the leap, he turned a -3 into a +2. Like that's impactful because of what he can do. He comes out third quarter and we think of that big sluggo to Aeneas Williams that really, and then Aeneas has the big run to get him in field goal range. But Jeremiah came out in that third quarter with purpose. He was running hard. He was like, screw this. Hey, coach, here's our halftime adjustment. Give me the freaking ball and let me get downhill. And that's what he did. I'm not saying Jeremiah would ever say that. I'm just like making a point. That's what really kind of got them going. The O-line was playing hard, and Jeremiah just came out and gashed him. It was like, say, when he went 6, 9, and 9, I think on back-to-back runs. And you're like, all right, this, like, you just knew right then, like, this is going to be a different team this half. Just the energy was different. Jeremiah was running with way more just burst coming downhill. The O-line was getting a great push. And then you run that sluggo and you're like, yep, okay, here we go. We're good. We're good. But Jeremiah sparked that. And that's the thing, Trev, but like his numbers aren't going to blow you away. But he had some big plays in that game. This is the game you hope that, okay, he's going to go off. You know, like you hope that this is the game where he had a little extra rest. It's going to have a little bit more juice. You hope, right? And then he just takes this game over. The other one to keep in mind, too, as we talk about Jeremiah, but these 3 playoff teams so far have held Jadarian Price in check. He had a couple big runs against Georgia and one that got called back, but I just have a hard time seeing both of those guys being kind of locked down for 4 games. I just feel like one of them is going to go off in this game. Jeremiah, I think, is the most likely because I think he is the most physically gifted running back in college football. With all due respect to Ashton Jeanty, who's the best running back in college football, right? I said most talented. You just have a hard time keeping both of them down for 4 games. I mean, Jeremiah had the big run against Indiana, but that was it for him, really. So I just you see it. You just kind of see it. And you hope that the O-line can you're gonna have if the O-line is what I think it's going to be, you're going to average about 315 pounds. So you hope that they can kind of lean on him a little bit and just open some holes. Because as we've said all year, Trev, you don't need that big of a hole with these kids.
Like we've said before, too, this team kind of plays with a different level of swagger to it. And if there's 2 players on this roster that I don't think need told that they've been contained for 3 games or for the better part of, call it 2.5 games, it's Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. The third one that we have, Brian, is it was the same group, same mindset. We went with the different players. And honestly, you could fill in even more players than what we're talking about here.
We didn't even really pick players.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, honestly. Yeah. I mean, but one of, or multiple, like they did against Penn State, Notre Dame pass catchers have to continue to step up. And one of them can emerge to be a game wrecker. Against Penn State, Mitchell Evans had a great game. Aeneas Williams had a great game, but the game wrecker was Jaden Greathouse. But all the guys that I just mentioned have the ability to do it. And then once you factor in a Jordan Faison, once you factor in potentially Eli Raridan has yet this year to show that he has been like a game wrecker, but the tight end position, based on certain matchups that I know we're going to talk about later in the week, has the ability to do it, right? But, Brian, we had for our third one, pass catchers for Notre Dame have to step up and build on the performance that they had against Penn State.
And I think you need 2, honestly. I think you need 2 guys, unless one guy just goes nuts. Unless Mitchell Evans goes for 9 for 130, does to Ohio State what he did to Duke last year. Unless something like that, or Jaden Greathouse or Jordan Faison goes for 9 for $150 or something. I think you need 2. And honestly, I don't care who it is. When we were talking, the first 2 names that came up were the obvious ones. It was Jaden Greathouse and Mitchell Evans, right? But then it's but Jordan Faison's had those moments, including in the post. Jordan Faison was really good against Georgia. He was really good against Indiana. He's had some big moments in the season. And then you look at it and say, well, Jaden Thomas has had some big time moments this season. Can he do it for volume? I don't know. Can Bo Collins get back to looking like he was early in the season? He was their leading receiver for a big chunk of the season. Now it's Jaden Greathouse is actually their leader in receiving yards. Mitchell Evans is now their leader in catches. Could it be Jaden Harrison and using his speed to make some big plays? Could it be, I'm kind of joking here, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. But could it be, Trev, that we finally have the Chris Mitchell awakening? That he finally gets some of those chances to make some of those plays. Who knows? Could it be Eli Raridan? Could it be Jeremiah Love? Could it be Aeneas Williams again? I don't care who it is, but you need a couple of those guys. And I think that's what makes this Notre Dame pass game dangerous when they're protecting Riley and Riley's feeling good. And this has been one of the, I've gotten frustrated with the receiving corps at times this year because they haven't played to their potential. But when this group plays with urgency, there's a lot of weapons that can hurt you. There's no Jeremiah Smith on this roster. There's no Emeka Egbuka on this roster. And I don't know that there's a Carnell Tate on this roster. But there's a lot of guys that can make plays. And that's what has worked for Notre Dame. But you're going to need a couple of those pass catchers, and I don't care what position they play, to make some big-time plays. Or it could be 4 guys making 2 big plays each. It could be 2 guys making a bunch of plays. Who knows? But you're going to need some pass catchers to keep up. Somebody's going to have to make a big-time catch in this game. Somebody's going to have to make a big-time play in this game. Somebody's going to have to do something after the catch. Somebody's going to have to get over top. And then if Riley hits them, they got to make the catches. Need some pass-catching game wreckers.
Plain and simple. I agree. I agree completely, and it's going to have to be multiple. Because one thing that we saw against Penn State is when they do step up and when they do have multiple, this offense gets significantly more dangerous than what it already is. There's been a lot of, school of thought around you have to have the Jeremiah Smiths, the Ryan Williams of the world. And to a degree, that's true. I would love if Notre Dame had a Jeremiah Smith, right? You talked about, if there was a draft for 2025 coming up, who would you run up and get? Jeremiah Smith. And I couldn't agree with that anymore.
If I was
But
having a receiver draft.
yeah, receiver draft.
I don't
Yeah.
know that I'd draft any receiver number 1 overall if we're having an
No.
overall draft, but if we're having a receiver draft, it's not even a conversation.
No, I'm with you. But the one thing that has made Notre Dame's offense hard to defend from a pass catching standpoint is it could be anybody. They've shown that. And, against IU, it was Jordan Faison. In other moments throughout the season, it was Mitchell Evans. At some points, it was Bo Collins. At some points, it was Jaden Greathouse. And so that is a factor of it, that they might not have that top end guy, but it could be anybody on any given game, right? Now, again, in the same light of Riley Leonard, that does give me a little bit of internal frustration, right? It stresses me out during the game to see who it is, but again, it does make it a little bit effective. So I'm with you right there. So defense, Brian, we covered the game wreckers on offense. Defense, this was the one where you and I almost verbatim had the same exact things written out. Not even we were on the same track. And the first one, sticking with the common theme of receivers being game wreckers on the opposite side, Notre Dame is going to need their corners to step up. Notre Dame is going to have really good play out of both Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, Brian.
Yeah, and I even think you could throw Jordan Clark in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all three of those guys have to be on top of their game. And that means not having the really bad penalties. It means being disciplined, not losing your, being flat-footed when Jeremiah Love's running to go at you, Emeka's running to go at you. It means not peeking in the backfield on a play action, because Ohio State loves run play action and then letting a guy get behind you. It means doing your job and doing it at a high level. And I think that's a big one. And they're going to need to play well. But also, Trev, there's going to be some moments where they got to get their hands on the football. Sometimes it's breakups on third down, like Jordan Clark has had a couple big third down breakups in this postseason. Sometimes it means you got to get the ball. Like, Will Howard will throw a couple of them up. When that happens, you got to get it. And they've been great at it all year. And part of it's not just this is what you have to do to pull off the upset. Part of it's like, dude, this is who you are. And you're now on the biggest stage. You got to play your game in the biggest moment. I mean, we talked about early in the year. I mean, Christian Gray dropped like 3 pick sixes. If you get a chance to do that in this game, can't miss. Got to have it. Got to make that play. Leonard Moore's had a couple times where he was close to picking a ball off against Georgia. You got to make that play. Got to make that play. And so if they can make those plays and then not have the big mistakes on their end, then I think you're going to have a chance to be pretty good in this game.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said about coverage. The only thing that I'm going to add here, Brian, is you have to continue to tackle well in space. You have Travion to the outside, and he can bust it on the perimeter. We've talked a lot about him this show. On that screen pass, Texas had members of the secondary that had a chance to bring Travion down. It doesn't matter if he goes for 74, keeps him out of the end zone, it's end of the half. So, Ohio State's receivers are dangerous after the catch. They do different things to get Egbuka, and they do different things to get Jeremiah Smith the football. They will run them on jet sweeps. They will hand the ball off to Egbuka at times. They will motion him into the backfield. So in run support, the corners are going to have to do a good job of bringing them down in the open field when they have the opportunity, because tackling was not good against Penn State, especially in the first half. Throughout the entire game, there was a shift when the second half hit, but tackling still wasn't great. It wasn't up to the Notre Dame standard that they had all year. Against Georgia, they had 4 missed tackles all game. Against Penn State, they had 15. So you can't have 15 missed tackles against Jeremiah Smith and against Egbuka and against Carnell Tate and against Quinshon and Travion. So tackling from the secondary is going to be huge, especially at the corner position. Leonard Moore had a very uncharacteristic, not great game tackling. And that was outside of him being great in coverage. That was one of the things that you got to bump in, right? When Ben Morrison got hurt, there was a lapse in coverage, because in my opinion, he was the best cover corner in college football. But where you got a little bit of an upgrade was size and run support, because Leonard Moore, he's just bigger. Ben Morrison was 5'11", $185. Leonard Moore is a true freshman, 6'2", 190. Leonard Moore ended up leading that cornerback room in tackles, even though he didn't get his first start until over the halfway point of the season, in the regular season. So tackling is going to have to be huge for the corners as well. Sticking with the secondary, Brian, and this one is about as obvious as it gets. In a game like this, you need your game wreckers to be game wreckers. You need your dudes to be dudes. And Xavier Watts all season has been that dude. And he didn't have the greatest of games against Penn State, and I don't think anybody has to tell him that. I think he knows that, especially by some of the things that we've been hearing around just the different interviews. Everybody seems to be locked in. I bet 0 on defense is at the forefront of that. But Xavier Watts is going to have a Xavier Watts performance in this one. Brian, what say you?
I mean, it's one of the most simple things we can do. You dudes got to be dudes. That means, you want to keep a Mecca from going off. He's going to have to be good. You want to keep, have some plays where maybe you're thinking that they've got cover one and you're thinking you're going to take a shot to Jeremiah Smith and Xavier disguises it. Comes screaming off the hash, takes a better angle than he did on the play to Arian Smith and is able to make a play on the ball. He one of the biggest plays of the USC game is when it was still a back and forth battle. They hit a deep ball late and Xavier comes over and knocks it out. I mean, you've got to make some plays like that. It means, last year Travion goes for 60. You got to tackle him 10 yards down the field, make that play. Ohio State's going to win this game because their best players play like their best players. Notre Dame's going to win this game because their best players play like their best players. And I don't know that Notre Dame has a better player than Xavier Watts. And you just look start to finish. And what's funny when you say he didn't have a very good game against Penn State, didn't play his best against Penn State, I guess is a better way of saying it. You're not wrong based on his standard. And that's what kind of makes it kind of funny because he still had a pretty good game in a lot of ways. He still made some plays in the game. But to your point, though, he didn't have the best game of his career. He didn't even have the best game of the playoffs. He still had 8 tackles, including 5 solos. And that's what you come to expect, where Xavier Watts can make 8 plays and we're like, yeah, he didn't play that well. It's it's almost like a compliment. And he's going to have to be on top of his game.
Absolutely. The last one that we have is somebody on the edge on defense, on the defensive line, is going to have to step up. Somebody's going to have the Georgia-esque type of game, whether that be a Bryce Young, whether that's Junior Tuihalamaka, whether that's RJ Oben, whether that's Josh Burnham, somebody along the edge, Logan Thomas, somebody along the edge is going to have to step up. Because for all the question marks that are surrounding the interior of the defensive line, right? The overall health of Howard Cross, still you're going on game number 3 without Riley Mills. Gabriel Rubio and Donnie Heinisch are going to do their thing. But somebody on the edge in this game is going to have to step up, because that's been the difference maker when their D-line and their defense is playing really well. The edges are playing very well in both pass rushing and in run defense, Brian.
Yeah. We can talk about one of the biggest differences in the first and second half against Penn State. First half, the defensive ends did a really poor job of setting the edge. Second half, a couple of those early runs, RJ Oben just comes up and blows the tight end or the tackle. I think it was a different guy. Just blows him into the backfield. Forces the cutback and linebackers there to clean it up. It's not just get after the quarterback. You got to also do your job to make sure that you don't allow Travion to get outside. You got to do your job to make sure you don't allow them to stretch you all the way out past the hash before he's making a vertical insertion. Those are all things that you got to do. And there's plenty of guys. And what I love about this group is they've had different guys step up at different moments. I mean, we talk about RJ Oben and Junior Tuihalamaka stepping up with big moments against Georgia. You talk about what does not get talked a lot about. Josh Burnham made one of the biggest plays in that game. On Penn State's first field goal drive, their first scoring drive. It's first and goal at the 1. No, second and goal at the 1. And he tackles the guy for a 2-yard loss from behind. Makes it 3rd and goal from the 3. Guy drops a pass. They're kicking a field goal. Maybe they go for it on 4th and goal from the 1 and get a touchdown. So that was a huge play. And it was just different guys at different times. And sometimes that's going to mean Kingston Viliama-Asa or Jalen Sneed and some third down packages as well. But the reality is run and pass. Notre Dame's going to have to to get some game wreckers on the edge. I would even say this, even if there's not a game wrecker player, like one guy comes up and has a monster game, they need at least 7 or 8 game wrecking plays off the edge. Whether that's 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1, and they just blow a tackle up and force the running back to cut back, he gets stuffed and it's end of drive, whether it's a big sack that kills a drive, even if, the strip sacks there's a lot of different things that you could look at and say, but they're going to need about 7 or 8 game wrecking plays off the edge. I don't care if it's 6 dudes making those 8 plays. I don't care. That they just need those number of plays. I don't care if Burnham makes one, Bryce Young makes one, Oben makes one, Tuihalamaka makes one, Kingston makes one, Jalen Sneed makes one, and then a couple others are made by, heck, screw it. Logan Thomas comes in and makes one. That's a 7th guy. I don't care. They just need that kind of high volume of game wrecking plays. And they had those against Georgia. They had a few more of those in the second half against Penn State. They're going to need those. They're going to need to play better up front against Ohio State than they did against Penn State. I will say that.
I have a very similar outlook on the edge rushers as I do the wide receivers for Notre Dame. Don't care who it is, but the unit as a whole has to be impactful, right? And it could be any combination of them. To your point that you just listed all of them out, but it just has to, that the takeaway when we sit down in the post game and we talk about why Notre Dame won or what happened to if they didn't, some of it is going to reflect back on the play around the edge rush and the edge players for Notre Dame's defensive line. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brian, that's going to do it for Game Wreckers for defense. We do have a couple of super chats to get to before we get out of here. So let me see here.
Got 8 of them.
Yep, we do. We sure do.
I was trying to find a number earlier. I was correct. Monroe Freeling gave up 3 sacks this season. That's it. According to Pro Football Focus, he only gave up 3 sacks all season. They just so happened to all come against Notre Dame.
Sure did.
So he did not allow a single sack the entire season until they played Notre Dame. And then, of course, he gave up 3 of them. So I thought that was a pretty interesting statistic. And this is a kid that had 363 pass blocks. Gave up 3 hits, 1 against Kentucky, 1 against UMass, 1 against Texas. That's it. But he gave up all 3 sacks against Notre Dame. And matter of fact, he's played 440 pass sets had 440 pass sets in his career according to Pro Football Focus. And he's only given up 3 sacks entire career so far, 2 years, and they're all against Notre Dame. Just that's what I was trying to remember earlier. And I think I said that yesterday, but I wanted to go look it up and be correct on it. But yeah, so let's get to them super chats, man.
Super chat from D. Beasy. Thank you for the super chat, Coach. On one today. Love it.
Yeah. That was during my little call out earlier in the show. Was not happy.
Neither was I, but it was worded perfectly.
Thank you, sir.
Worded perfectly. Super chat from Jersey Bear. Thank you for the super chat. Love you guys. Love this team. Let's win it all. Hey, man.
Yeah.
Didn't come this far to come this far.
Yeah. I can dig that. I just I was looking at an interesting stat, Trevor. This is from teamrankings.com, but I thought this was interesting. Notre Dame is 12-2-1 this year against the spread.
Saw that.
Ohio State is 9-6. But what I also thought was interesting is the margin of victory in those games. Notre Dame was 3rd in the country at 23.6. And Ohio State was 3rd at 23.6. Notre Dame was 22.7. But here's one: the average amount of points that the team covers the spread by. Ohio State 3.0, Notre Dame 10.1. I thought that was interesting. You'd probably know what that means a little bit more than I do, but that seems like a good thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the one thing that I will say in the defense of Ohio State is some of their spreads that they come out with
are stupid,
are nuts.
Yeah, like 9.5 against this, Notre Dame, right?
Super chat from Reese Briner. Thank you, Reese. Klatt said on his show today that Notre Dame won't score more than 17 points and that he doesn't know how they'll have any success on first down. Wild take.
I'm so tired of talking about Joel Klatt's bad takes about Notre Dame. He's had a bunch of them. He also thought they're going to lose to Indiana, I believe. I believe he also picked them to lose to Penn State.
And
He
Army.
did he did pick them to beat Georgia. And he also picked them to lose to Navy, I believe. Or he had the upset alert was very high.
Yeah, it was one of the service schools.
Whatever.
It's been tough. In the preseason, Joel Klatt was very high on Notre Dame. The second they lost to Northern
He
Illinois,
hasn't gotten over it. He emotionally has not gotten over it.
the second.
He's also a big time Big Ten
Yeah.
guy because he, that's the network is there. Whatever, it is what it is.
Oh yeah.
Joel Klatt's one of my favorite color guys.
Mm-hmm.
I've in the past have been I've enjoyed listening to his takes on college football, not just Notre Dame related. He's had a lot of takes from dude, are you not doing the same homework you've done in the past? Are you spreading yourself too thin or something? Because you have had some really rough takes this year. And it's not just about Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's been the one where it's been the most egregious.
Mm-hmm. Super chat from Tom Connor. Thank you, Tom. Just started listening, and Brian's rant was great. He expressed my feelings exactly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, buddy. I am just that's one of those times, Trevor, where one of the things that I feel that has become my responsibility in the job that I do, in the role that I have covering this team, because I don't view myself the same as some of the other beat writers, because why would I ever try to be like Tim Priester?
Sure.
This is a guy that I grew up watching. I will never be a beat writer like Tim Priester. I'll never be that good. So why try to pretend? I am who I am. I'm a football coach, and I'm going to cover this team that way. But I also feel like now that I'm running my own company, and this Irish Breakdown is mine, right? I can kind of say what I want to say, and sometimes without having the fear of let's just say hypothetically that somebody at 247 Sports didn't like that take from Dennis Dodd. Well, that's your parent company. You got to be careful professionally. You got to be careful with how you respond to those type of things. I'm not saying anybody does. I've not talked to anybody that's a full-time employee at there. I'm just making a point. When I was at Blue and Gold Illustrated and we were affiliated with Rivals, I was told very early on, because I'd go hard at Rivals, hey man, that's our people. You can't go at them like that. And I don't have that affiliation anymore. Our website's our message board's independent. Our podcast is independent. We have a company that we're now with, Believe, which I'm super excited about, by the way. I don't know if I've announced that or not yet on the show, but we're now partnered with Believe, which I'm super excited about. We've already been on Believe TV. They've had us on there, which is pretty awesome. But they don't dictate what we talk about. They sell the advertising. They do a lot of the production stuff on the back end. It's different. They're a partner in a completely different way than Rivals was our partner when I was at BGI. And so I get to kind of be that guy that says, I don't have to be beholden to anybody else. I'm my own boss. So I can say whatever I want to say. Point being, sometimes I feel like the fan base needs to have a voice. And I've been blessed enough to have the kind of platform where I can amplify my feelings a little bit more than someone who maybe has 100 Twitter followers who has a great comment to make about this, but not as many people see it.
Yeah.
I can amplify that. And when Notre Dame needs to be defended the way that I think it does, I'm going to do that. And I did that when Brian Kelly, made the comments he made when he left Notre Dame. And I did that when Brian Kelly was gone and he came back and started talking about how he wanted to be around championship players and be at a place that basically was going to give him the resources to win. I did that the other day when Brian Kelly was kind of I never said that you couldn't win championships at Notre Dame. Lie. And here's the quote. I have the receipts. And this is one of those times that I felt like that my platform needed to be used to put the smack down on some nonsense. And that's exactly what I did. And I am blessed to be able to do that because, Tom, I know you're not alone. There's our people that are one thing that bothers me is when people are well, people at Irish Breakdown, they just repeat whatever Brian says. They're puppets. And I'm or maybe they like the show because when they hear me say things, they're like, finally, someone's saying something that I agree with or that I believe. I like that guy because he says what I wish I could say publicly. And I try to use the platform for that. And so I appreciate, Tom, that you feel that way. And hopefully you're not alone, because I felt it needed to be said. It needed to be said.
Super chat from Iden Benami. Thank you, Iden. Do we like or think Jags is better for us right now at left tackle?
I don't know. I mean, in theory, your best lineup, if everybody's healthy and full go and locked in and has the reps needed to play their best football, is Rocco. Right now, with the injuries you've had, Rocco at right guard and Jagsaw at left tackle. My concern, however, is you're going against Jack Sawyer and JT. I'm eventually going to say his name correctly, but I don't want to disrespect it right now, so I'll just say JTT. Do you really want a guy playing left tackle that's had a week of practice at left tackle? That's my concern. Now, if Charles picks it up like it's riding a bike, then great, put him there, because I think he has the ability to be forceful against the run, and he has the ability to the size and the length to handle the edge. And so in some ways, yeah, I love him at left tackle, but my concern is, does he have the work necessary to play at a high level and execute at a high level against these guys? My fear is you have him at left tackle and he's supposed to slide out and take over a wide rusher off the edge, and he doesn't see it. Riley thinks he's supposed to pick it up, and cornerback comes from behind and drills Riley Leonard, knocks the ball out. Those things like that are my big concern, just because of the lack of work. But if he's comfortable with and he can execute at a high level, I do like that lineup, assuming Rocco's 100%. Because if Rocco looks like he did last week, then I'd rather have Charles at right guard and Tosh at left tackle. But I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, my whole thing with this is, like, to be honest, my concern with Jagasaw at left tackle doesn't even have anything to do with Charles Jagasaw. It's around the health of Rocco Spindler. That's my biggest concern. But like, I agree, Brian, that like it's, how much practice time have you gotten? And you're asking him to go and step in and block JT Tuimoloau. So I'm with you there. But again, if Jagasaw is playing left tackle, that means that they're still going with Rocco at right guard. And for all the talk around Jagasaw being able to not learn the position because he's played it before, but my question in 10 days isn't Jagasaw being able to perform at left tackle. It's how healthy could Rocco get in 10 days? That's the way that I look at it. It freaks me out, man, if I'm just being honest with you. So to answer your question, I don't know, because it all depends around the health of 50. But if he is good to go, I think the best offensive line is Charles Jagasaw at left tackle and Rocco at right guard. But I think in a situation like this and in a game like this, it has to be, you play the healthiest guy. Take the name and the number away from it. You play the 5 healthiest guys that have had time this year, right? I mean, it's the one play where Rocco's ankle gave out, Riley Leonard got evaluated for a concussion. Like, that is what it is, right? And it's not because Rocco sucks. He gave everything that he had to this team.
Couldn't plant.
Yeah, but he couldn't anchor on his leg, and he got driven back. Riley got flushed out of the pocket.
And do you want him doing that for 60 minutes against Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton and those guys? Right. Now, hopefully, like you said, Trev, hopefully the test came back and he's actually good. It just, had a minor tweak and the offense was rolling and he's going to be okay. I hope that's the case, because as I said, if Rocco was back to pre-injury against Indiana Rocco and you had Charles at left tackle,
whoa,
they're going to run the ball in Ohio State. Like, they're just going to run the ball in Ohio State. But as you mentioned, that's the key is how can Rocco play? Mm-hmm. How much push can Rocco get off the line?
Yep.
Now, the good news is I have had some conversations about Rocco's incredibly strong. So even if he can't necessarily like drive off of that foot, he tends to be a bench presser anyway. Rocco's been a guy that tends to kind of hit with his body and then bench you off of him as opposed to striking. So he can still kind of do some of that, and he's 325. You can't have him where last week he could just get nothing, no push at all off of it. He doesn't have to be dominant that way.
Yeah.
But if Rocco's healthy, and his body's responded well to what happened on against Penn State, then I like this alignment. I do.
Yep.
So, I mean, honestly, if Charles Jagusah is healthy, this is pretty much what the lineup should have looked like, with the exception of Ashton Craig should have been at center. Right?
Yep.
Because, this is what it should have looked like.
Yeah.
And then if Ashton goes down, maybe Knapp's the one stepping in at center. If, who knows? Who knows? This is from Rose Quartz Lemonade, Trev. This is one of the Ohio State fans that's been in the chat today and is really enjoyed. Don't agree with them or her, but has been a real productive part of the chat today. So we appreciate you, Rose Quartz Lemonade.
Yeah, appreciate you hopping in and being respectful and throwing in a super chat, Rose. To your point, our defense is violent. Our offense is fast. I agree. We aren't a bar-fighting team offense. We're trying to knock you out. On defense, we brought steel-toe boots and a knife.
I love that. That's not a knife. That's a knife. Yeah, one of my favorite lines from a movie. The comments that I was making earlier, like there's some Notre Dame fans that will say, "Oh, Ohio State's soft." That's not the point of what we're talking about. It's not about them being soft. It's about the style of play. Even on defense, Ohio State is fast and they're aggressive and they'll hit you, but they don't play smash mouth football. That's not who they are. It doesn't mean that they can't, be physical. It's just meant to be a style of play. Like Georgia is built to be a smash mouth football team on defense. That's how they're constructed. Ohio State's is meant to be powerful, disruptive, fast, aggressive, getting to the ball. So that's where I'm coming from. And on offense, it's not that they're soft because Ohio State's soft. No, they're not soft. They're stylistically not built for that. Like, I don't think Texas is soft in that, like, their players are soft and afraid of. It's just how they design that offense. It's meant to be that way. So we got to get these last two, Trev, and then I got to get rolling.
All right, man. Super chat from Sun City, another one of the Ohio State fans that hopped in the chat today. Thank you for the super chat. Great content, guys. Appreciate that, man.
And then the last one.
One last one from Iden Benami. Thank you, Iden. Riley Leonard right now is who Brian said he was all summer. Spot on.
That's the guy they recruited.
Sure is.
Thank you, Iden.
Thank you for the super chat, Iden. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. We will be back tomorrow with more content coming at you. Tomorrow, Brian, we are going to be talking about let me make sure I have this right here. We're going to be talking about the matchups that matter. And we're going to be taking a deep dive into that.
We might go a different direction because we did talk about Matt. We'll see, but it's mainly we might just go buy sell hold the whole time.
Cool, me. I haven't done a buy sell hold in a minute. I love buy sell holds. So, well, either way, we will be back here tomorrow with more content coming at you guys. But the best way to stay in the now is make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family and anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you guys do. The best way to support what we do here at Irish Breakdown is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So IB Nation Sports Talk is going to be live tonight at 6, and Brian and I will be back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. to bring you more content for this national championship week. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor, and we will see you back here again on the Irish Breakdown podcast.